Hi GERO 550, this is Caitlin, and this is a response to lecture 13, question number 2, about the case study on idealized design. And the textbook says that idealized design is a change process that identifies the desired program, and it picks out the elements wanted here and now rather than something farther in the future. It breaks it down into 5 phases as you go through the idealized design process. That first phase is to formulate the mess, and this is when the organization is going to look outside of itself. So it's going to look at what's happening in the environment and what's happening within the organization to see what can be better, what can be changed. The second step of the process is the idealized design, and this is when the organization is going to lay out what they hope that is going to look like, and this can continue to change throughout the process, but at least lays that kind of foundation. Maybe it's their beginning of their vision of what that program or the renewal will be. The third step is the means planning, and this is how the organization identifies alternative approaches or strategies and figuring that part of the process out. Step 4 in the process is resource planning, so what fiscal and human resources, other resources are they going to need to implement this new plan. And then finally, the last step is design implementation and control. So this is when the changes are implemented, and then a team is created that will identify and oversee and report on how those changes are looking. So the textbook then goes into about an example of a case study of implementing these changes, and it's a hospital setting that's wanting to create a geriatric program. They first go through the changes with a group of community members, administrators, staff, and older adults. They then look back and then create a new team of just administrators and staff that will create the plan for the geriatric program. Once the program is created, they create their idealized design of what they're wanting. They break it down into 3 areas. They want increased access for older adults to medical care, coordination among different areas of the hospital, and then earlier intervention and a lot of prevention of different things. They also start a sensitivity training for their staff on the needs of older adults, and they also establish a community committee to oversee these programs and how successful they are being. So some of the advantages that I think the idealized design program has is it provides an opportunity for input from different staff members and leaders within the organization to create the best plan. It's not just one person's idea, but it's a group effort to see what they can do. And it also creates a plan. What are you going to need? What resources, whether that's monetary or just the standards of what you're wanting that program to be like, or what changes will need to be made to an existing program. And the disadvantages I found was that it doesn't really take into account what happens once you implement it. So it just says to implement the program and have a change committee. And I think if you do work within this industry or within another company, you know that change is not an easy thing, and it's not something that just happens overnight easily. They don't really discuss, it seems like it's coming from the top down instead of going into the trenches and with those frontline workers and saying, here, this is what our hopes and dreams are, how can we work together and build that fire within those employees to have it come from the bottom up instead of just the top down. I think it was interesting that the first group they had was just with the community members, the older adults, administrators, and staff, and then they decided to go back and do the phases again with just administrators and staff. And I think it's also very important that if you're designing a program for older adults, that you take that input and their needs into account, and why not have an older adult that is part of that process? And it didn't really go into detail about if they took any of that into account when they started the second phase and the second group to create the geriatric program for the hospital. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next vlog.